That faith itself is of an inconsistent nature. Murdo MacDonald Bayne. In this letter I want to show you that faith itself is of an inconsistent nature, depending upon your understanding. You have all experienced the result of impressions that you have accumulated in the past and stored away in your minds. If your minds have been filled with erroneous ideas and fears that have kept you from really living impressions of fear, worry, anxiety, disease, despondency that give rise to a doubtful attitude of mind, this then leads to failure, ill health, and unhappiness. When the dominant idea in the mind is fear, this brings about a life of impotency, inferiority, and insecurity, because everything moves round the dominant attitude which is outpictured in the life and circumstances. This negative attitude, instead of being of any value to you, brings more and more of its kind, and you are forever trying to patch up your lives without result. The majority of people have allowed this state to exist not only with themselves but have imparted it to their children and those in close association with them. This is the cause of many being unable to realize or express their true nature. It is only when you begin to learn something of the truth about yourselves, your real self, and identify yourselves with this reality or creator, you refuse to be associated with the prevailing negative attitude which alone makes you slaves. You thus need have no anxiety about the future. The Master's teaching and works showed the natural outcome of his perfect recognition of the divine principles within himself. He recognized that it was utterly impossible for him to be separated from the Father of all, and it was this attitude of mind that made him what he was. And he never set up his power as a proof of a nature different from ours. On the contrary, he said that those who learned what he taught would eventually be able to do greater things. There was no theory or guesswork about what he taught, and when we begin to understand the fundamentals underlying what he taught, the true meaning of his teachings will be a guard against any negative kind of thinking. If you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will say unto the mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible to you. Matt. 18:20. Now when we begin to consider faith, it appears to have a very inconsistent nature. It is determined and affected by the kind of understanding you have, and this determines the degree and quality of your faith. If you can grasp the mighty truth the Master did, it will place you beyond the destructive attacks of doubt, fear, worry, apprehension, and place you in a position to operate upon the law to fulfill its promises of satisfactorily producing, whatever ye ask in my name, it shall be done unto you. When you acquire the right attitude of mind through the realizations that you are heir to all the Father has, you will realize the meaning of Son, thou art ever with me, and all that is mine is thine. Therefore the practical application of the power of the Spirit can produce for you an abundance of any good thing, health, happiness, and a successful life. Now to understand fully, let me make it plain to you in as few words as possible. There is only one mind in the whole universe, the infinite mind, and this must fill boundless space, for to be infinite it must include all, and there cannot be anything outside it. Therefore we are all in the infinite mind, and there is no other substance to use. The animating power in that mind is the conscious life that creates all and is capable of expressing itself in a variety of forms, and is the only creative power there is, and this creative power is individualized in us and is capable of realizing itself. Science has proved that matter separate from energy does not exist and changes into other forms of energy without loss of the original force, which originates in the infinite mind. Therefore matter is mind materialized. When this is grasped by the consciousness, you will see that whatever you create in fear is just as real as what you create in faith, for whatever is dominant in the mind reproduces itself in the personal life and circumstance as a natural sequence of the law of cause and effect. In the Bible we are shown the allegory of the two trees, which grow in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is the soul of man, where these two trees grow. One is the tree of life, the Christ in you, and the other is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, otherwise the intellect, which is speculative. It is made plain that man must not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or he would die in his trouble, and this is man's reaction to the condition he himself creates through his lack of understanding that the tree of life is the only creative power. Eve and Adam are so closely related as to be represented as a wedded pair. This is the soul and body, and whatever the soul realized, so would it be produced upon the body. The tree of life is the life of God, the only creative power, and known to man as the Christ. I am the life. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil was man's conception of things through the intellect, and because he was not aware of the tree of life he created for himself in his ignorance all his own misfortune because of his misconception, and so he fell. To be free then you must see that there can be no separation between you and the Father, and that you possess the Father's gifts, and nothing can be accomplished without him, for we are told that we are made in his image and likeness. The trouble with most people is that they do not take this great truth into consideration, and if they did they fear that they might be considered foolish, but this is the stupid intellect at work. The intellectuals, you will notice, are mostly devoid of wisdom and are self-opinionated in their own ignorance. The only requirement of the creative mind is that we include it in all our plans and schemes, even though its activities are unseen, they become known only through the results. But one thing you can be sure of is whatever is dominant in your consciousness, so it must come forth because of the law of the creative power inherent in you. The formula is, whatever you are aware of, so the active principle of life will bring it forth in the substance, and the only substance is the universal mind. Therefore you must use the faculties that God has placed in you by virtue of his presence, and with the will of God intelligently play your part in his predetermined scheme of creation, consciously cooperating with him, thereby fulfilling your own spiritual and material needs. What is mine is thine. And because there are different degrees of understanding, so are there varying degrees of faith and consequently corresponding degrees of success. The Christ is your pattern, and if you will look into your mind in the light of what I have said, you will see what is hindering you. Great work lies before you, and you are assured that you are not alone, for God and you are working together, and it cannot be otherwise. For without him you could not exist, and if you were in any way separate from him he could not be infinite, and this is proof of what Jesus said when he saw this truth: the Father and I are one. This offers to you peace, power, strength, and beauty, and to assert your claim you must take possession of your inheritance. Refuse to accept the heredity of the habitual erroneous thinking, a legacy left by the intellect of your forefathers, and claim the heredity of your divine nature, which is urging you continually to accept your share of the unlimited resources which are ready to flow into everyone capable of receiving. The doorway is the consciousness, the individualization of the conscious life of God, and is capable of realizing and recognizing itself. This is your creative power, and through this alone flows the inexhaustible resources of the Almighty. This is what is meant by the words, "Take hold of this tree of life and it will become a spring of living water rising up to eternal life to all those who realize it." Benediction. O everlasting presence, thy ecstasy is in the breath of thy creation. The stricken have heard of thy healing power and have come to thy door and find it ajar. Printed in lettering of love they saw enter in. Those whose hearts are breaking with despair and sadness, thy invisible hand has dried away their scalding tears. Those who are lost in illusion, to whom shall they turn but to thee alone, who is seated upon the throne of love and wisdom, and as the dawn of thy presence appears upon their consciousness their troubles will take wings. We rejoice in thy quiet silent voice forever singing in our souls, "Wilt thou be mine? For whatever is mine is also thine." Peace be with you. Yours sincerely, 𝗦 MacDonald Bayne.